And welcome back, guys. Today I actually wanted to record a video on rook endgames, but there was a pretty cool game from the FIDE World Cup which I wanted to show you instead, since it's a more time-sensitive area and rook endgames can wait for another video. So today was round number 4 of the FIDE World Cup, the first classical game, and the one I want to show you was between Levon Aronian and Radoslav Wojtaszek. And Aronian played this very funny looking idea in the opening, where I actually wanted to make a separate video for that already a couple of months ago, because I've seen it already then being played by Fabi. But now that it's actually being played in classical is something I could not really believe. But Levon managed to play it successfully and won a very nice game against the strong Polish grandmaster. So let me show you what happened there. Levon played e4. Wojtaszek is sort of a 99% e5 player nowadays. He is also a big expert on the Najdorf, but if he wants to play solid, typically he chooses the martial defense. So he goes e5, now Aronian goes knight c3, Wojtaszek goes knight f6, and now the move a3 was played by Aronian, which looks like something probably a beginner would play, but certainly not someone in playing in the World Cup. And Levon Aronian, who has had a rating over 2800, yeah, just a very peculiar situation that this has been played in such an important game and also worked with such a great success. So first of all, what is the idea of a3 even? There is the idea that the b4 square is covered in many positions, which is already sort of a good thing and quite a useful thing in many variations. But I think that the main ideas of it, which Levon also said in his interview, just basically to get a chess game and not to rely on any theory whatsoever. And there are quite a couple of ideas behind the line as well, which might not look at it at first. But there is a way for black to get into some practical difficulties at the very least, which also did end up in the game as it happened. So Wojtaszek played the move d5. I will want to show you the game quickly first, and then we'll go back to the opening stage where I want to talk about some things there. I did spend some time analyzing the line a little bit now. I will just put it into a Leech's study and link it down in the description down below in case you guys are curious about it and want to maybe analyze it a bit further after that. Just have some brief notes, but you can definitely continue from there on. So Wojtaszek played d5, e takes d5, knight takes d5, and now the first thing which we need to acknowledge is that this is basically a scotch, just that white has the extra move a3, which is specifically useful in this line with queen h5, which Levon played. The same is also possible in the normal scotch if we go right here. Queen h4 is a move, but it does not have a great reputation nowadays with computers. It has been sort of refuted. I mean, it's not losing yet, but white gets a large advantage if he goes knight c3, bishop b4, and now knight b5 is possible, which is not possible if white's pawn is on a3, or in this case, the pawn on a6. So this is the kind of main idea of this line, that it's here playable and not just outright bad, since knight b4 is never going to be an issue later on. And practically speaking, it's already quite difficult. Also, this other line, like it's objectively it's bad, but practically speaking, like if you've seen this for the first time, it might be not so easy to get to kind of understand the right continuation from here on, because you need to be ready to sacrifice the pawn on e4. So in the game, queen h5 was played. Now Wojtaszek played the move knight c6, which is very logical. Black generally has quite a few playable moves here, which is quite obvious that after this move a3, black is probably not, does not have to be super precise and has many different options, but he always has some practical questions to answer. So queen d6 would be possible. He played knight c6, very natural. Bishop b5, again renewing the threat on the pawn on e5, which generally here is quite difficult to protect. Like f6 is not possible because of the pin. Bishop d6 is not possible because the knight on d5 would be hanging. And after knight c6, bishop b5, this whole new threat renews itself. And here is the moment where in the normal scotch there would be this knight b4, which asks some uncomfortable questions. But since that is not possible here, Wojtaszek played the move bishop e7. Again, queen d6 is possible, but I will focus on the game. Bishop e7, queen takes e5. So black sacrifices a pawn for some obvious compensation here. Took on c6, b takes c6. and queen takes c3. So black has a lead in development, and on top of that the bishop here, but also has the worst pawn structure, and if white manages to consolidate, then white is just going to end up being a pawn up. Levon played knight f3, c5, d3, bishop b7, bishop e3, and here Wojciech already committed quite a grave mistake by going rook e8 here, which looks quite natural, putting the rook on the open file, and he's going to go bishop f6 or bishop d6 next. But now Levon had time to actually castle queenside, where the king is much safer than it would be on the king side. If white would castle short, he always needs to count on bishop takes f3, ruining the structure in front of the king. And here, after something like, for example, queen d5, it could become a little bit dangerous for white. So he went queenside castle and now actually managed to consolidate his extra pawn, and is already clearly better at this point. Queen f5, knight d2 was a very strong move. He gave back the pawn on g2 for some activity on the g file, and also still the pawn on c5 is hanging. So actually here bishop f6 is the only move. Otherwise, if the bishop would move back, then there would be checkmate on g7. So bishop f6, and now Levon took the pawn on c5, got an endgame with a pawn up, and converted that very nicely. There was this moment here also, which I really like, the move f4, further restricting the bishop on f6, stopping bishop g5 check, for example. And now white is just a clear pawn up. He took on e1, bishop h4, rook e5, rook to e8, bishop e3 back, rook e5, knight takes e5, bishop e8, and honestly at first I thought that black might have some drawing chances in this endgame, but how Levon played it after seeing that, I did not really see any way to save it. He had just such a great technique in this game. He started with c4, and he just wants to advance his pawns on the queenside, where he also is stronger. He has 2 extra pawns on the queenside, so he has to play there to be able to win the game. Bishop e7, d4, f6, knight d3, king to g6. Looks like black has some counterplay with the king, but actually d5 is coming, and all of a sudden white also has ideas with bishop c5, and if he manages to trade the bishop pair, then it's most likely going to be lost pretty easily. So Wojciech played c6, bishop c5, now bishop d8, not giving away the bishop pair, but now d6, and now also the pawn on d6 is just very, very annoying, and black always needs to take d7 into account. If it works, this pawn is very close to queening. So king f5 was played, bishop a7, another nice move. Now he wants to prepare the move. Actually, let me put a diagram here, because bishop a7 also really deserves attention. The idea is to go c5 and then bishop b6 next, which wouldn't be possible if the bishop were behind the pawn. Then c5 would look nice, but you would prefer to play c5 and then bishop b6. So he played this, king e6, now c5, and sooner or later bishop b6 is coming. Actually, it's a huge threat already. c5, now bishop b6 was played. Bishop f6, if black would take here and take on d6, I guess that there would be the nice win, knight c5 here, if I'm not missing anything here. Probably not the only win here. White could maybe also try something like b4, or even h4 could be possible. But yeah, unless I'm missing something easier here, it should just be kind of a strategical domination. So bishop f6 was played in the game. Now knight to b4, bishop takes b2, and after a4, Wojciech actually resigned, because there's nothing black can do about white just taking on a6 next, and then this pawn will also decide. Maybe also knight c7 will come, but at least white will just push down the a pawn until a8 basically, and there's nothing which black can do about it. So a very nice game by Levon, with a very original opening idea. And now let's get back to this point. So firstly, to give you kind of a backstory behind this line itself, I first heard about it by my friend and national team colleague Markus Raga, who actually faced this from the black side against none other than Fabiano Caruana in some Title Tuesday. And this is also apparently how Levon got to know about the line. He spoke about in his interview today that he had a chat with Fabiano about his sort of advice on what he should play against Wojciech, and this apparently came up, that it could be worth a try, and in fact it did turn out to be a nice idea. So what is kind of the general idea if black does not go for the move d5? After d5 it becomes obvious that at least white has some practical possibilities, and it's not so easy for black, especially in blitz, but also in classical, as we saw. So what are the other logical moves? I've analyzed bishop c5 or knight c6. Let's start with knight c6, and here Fabi's idea is to go d3. If you would go knight f3, it's another line which can be reached more classically via the 4 knights and then a3, which I've actually played myself. Also quite a tricky line here. The point is if d5, white can go bishop b5, but this is not sort of the idea. This line is already sort of well known, and black has a couple of ways to almost kill the game here, like knight takes e4, for example, queen e2, and also here I think there's this move queen d6, and this is how the line goes when black equalizes comfortably as far as I remember. So this is not the idea after knight c6, but instead d3. And here, of course, black does have a couple of possible ways of playing. I've analyzed bishop c5 or d5, but I could also imagine that black maybe can play something like g6. I did not check this with the computer. I'm just sitting here. It looks also perfectly playable. So again, this line is not if you want to put maximum pressure out of the opening. It's just kind of a trick weapon, and also, like in classical, if you want to just get a game from the start and not play any theory, then this is the right choice for you. So let's start with bishop c5. Now, knight f3 is white's idea. This was also played by Grigori Oparin, who is Fabiano's second, so I'm sure they've worked on this together. The point here is that knight g4 is not really that effective. It is possible, but white still can play d4. Black has to take back with the pawn. Now knight a4 is possible, which at least leads to kind of an interesting game. Oparin had 2 games here against Dominguez Perez. Dominguez in both games played d6. There are also other options like b6 or bishop e7 at this point. And after d6, h3, actually Dominguez ran into trouble in both of those games. He went knight g5 in one game, which then ended up with a position like this, with 2 bishops for white and a nice advantage. In the other game, he went knight f6, but also there, sort of a similar story happened, with white having the 2 bishop pair advantage and a slightly better position. So knight g4 is still a good move, but I think that d6 already, the computer was showing, is not the most accurate. Again, bishop e7 or b6 even that was a bit better according to the computer, is a better choice, but also here I'm sure it's possible to find a playable continuation for white if you intend to play this. Also possible is d6 here, also very logical, but here actually white has the idea b4 and then wins the bishop pair like this, which actually grants white some opening advantage. Instead, a5 was played by Markus Raga, what I mentioned earlier, which is bad because of knight takes e5, also played by Fabi. Knight takes e5, d4, bishop d6, f4. And now it's actually this one line from the 4 knights I'm actually noticing, or some very similar one, where white also has this exact idea. I'm not sure how it actually comes. Like, there are quite a few of them which are possible. Like, for example, here, bishop c5, knight takes e5 is possible. This is one of the lines, but here it's kind of a strange one. Some of you, if you know the exact comparison, let me know in the comment section down below. Anyway, it came like this. Now, knight takes e5, d4, bishop d6, f4, knight eg4, e5, bishop e7, and now there's a novelty which Fabi did not play. He played bishop e2 in the game, I think, but instead h3 is stronger. And after knight h6, now to take and go queen e2 when white has some advantage according to the computer, with bishop g2 to come. Also bishop h4 is not going to be dangerous because white can just play king d1. And the knight on h6, of course, is highly misplaced. So what is actually the best here? And in general, like, I would maybe from the black side play this system right here and this move order with just short castle, when it's not so easy to come up with anything that special for whites. Probably b4 is the intention when black has a couple of playable moves. Bishop d4 is one idea here, since black does not have the pawn on d6 just yet as earlier. Black will have some opportunities to maybe play d5 in one go later, for example here, and then d5 is one idea, or also a5. Also bishop e7 leads to an equal game like this, even though, like, if I would have to pick someone, it would probably be white. d5 is not going to be an easy move for black to make, because then he needs to count on b5, and then the e5 pawn could be hanging sometimes. Or it could lead to some favorable kind of Philidor positions. And if d6, then white at least has more space on the queen side here. Yeah, of course, an equalist position, but still, if we would reach this here, I would probably pick white. So knight c6 is possible, probably would be my choice. Also, there was something else here. Yeah, after d3 here, probably the best move here is d5. Actually, that would be my choice. When now white needs to rely on bishop g5, d4, knight d5. This is kind of the most critical line of against this system, when it's more difficult for white to to equalize, I would say, even. I'm not sure what was the exact idea of Levon. I'm quite sure it was to go into this, because still black needs to kind of be ready to play d4, knight d5, and now queen d6, which is also not such an easy move to make. Instead, if black takes on e4, now here white does keep some pressure. Since bishop e4 is not possible, the pin is a bit annoying for black as well. So black needs to know this or find this over the board, most likely. Knight d5, queen d6, important, and now this was the best which the computer showed. And here there are a couple of moves for black, like h5, bishop d7, many different possibilities, but I think the most straightforward is just to go f5. Queen h5 is sort of forced, I mean, not specifically, but otherwise black should already be better. And now queen g6, take, and I think it's obvious that if someone should be better here, it's black. I think that white is still equal here, but it looks a little bit more comfortable for black, in my opinion. And apart from that, like, of course, white could take here, but this would just be, yeah, now this move a3 is probably not, I mean, it's not useless, but it's also not changing the whole evaluation of those Philidor positions. So this is certainly critical. Now, was there anything left here? So knight c6, d3, d5, certainly the line I would choose here. And also bishop c5 is playable, but here black does need to be a little bit careful not to run into any tricks. So that leaves us with the move bishop c5 immediately. Now knight f3. And here again, black does need to be a little bit careful. Like knight g4, trying to aim for the fried liver, now is bad because of the d4, e takes d4, knight a4. Black does not have bishop b4 check like in the fried liver, and therefore actually is already much worse because knight takes d4 is simply coming on the next move. So instead, black should go d6, and now we have some strange Italian with a3 if white would go for bishop c4, but instead probably the best idea is to go d4, aiming to get some strange type of Scotch position, which actually I think is fully playable for white, and black does need to be a little bit careful here not to end up in any strange complicated positions. Like this was the top line which I looked at, or at least one of them. Most players played here with h6 and rook e8, that's why I've checked it. There were not many games here, but still like four games here. Long castle c6, queen d3, and here black needed to find those moves here which were not all fully obvious, and still it goes on, like knight d2, knight c4, or knight takes e4 is now also a threat. So this is certainly something which can be tried with white. I would not be scared to go there if I want to get like a fresh position. This is exactly what I would be looking for. But instead, as I said earlier, this knight c6, d3, and then d5 is definitely the most critical. I've also seen that there was one game, I think Oparin played after, was it bishop e7 here, and then g4 was played. So there are many different original ideas in this line. And if you are aiming to get kind of a fresh position from the start, not play any theory whatsoever, this is definitely a great choice for you. And it's definitely also going to throw your opponents out of book, at least if they didn't watch this video, and if they also didn't watch any of the other recaps, which probably are going to come out after this fascinating win. So guys, as I said, you can find the Leech's study in the description down below of some of the notes I did from this brief analysis. And apart from that, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Also let me know if you are going to play this idea or if it's too crazy for you. Apart from that, I'm going to see you guys in the next video.